Hi, everybody. This is Georgia Musgrave with another Recruiter Table Talk. I'm so excited to be hosting today's Recruiter Table Talk because, as you know, we're always focused on those trending topics that make a difference to your recruiting strategies. And today is no different. We're going to be talking about the coming wave of Gen Z workers. Yes, that's right. They're here. They're here. Age group 12. Yeah, they're here. 12 to 27. And if you're not aware, this is quickly becoming this generation, a dominant force in the marketplace. And they bring such a wealth of knowledge and intrigue. So forget those stereotypes, forget what the social media platforms are sharing with you. You're going to get the straight story here from, of course, the panel that is always accompanying me at these Recruiter Table Talks. So we've got some experts here sharing some great strategies and tips for you, whether you're a hiring manager trying to upscale your employment engagement techniques and opportunities for your staff, or whether you're recruiting and you're needing to open up the marketplace for other employers and other employees, excuse me. So without further ado, we've got a great table talk with a great panel. We've got Kristen Posen, Colleen Neese, and Sharon Grace, all experts as executive recruiters and coaching alongside of managers to this day nationally on issues that face their recruiting strategies. So they've got great stories to tell about ways in which you can attract and retain this great generation, but also because we've made it our personal commitment to hire a variety of people in diverse backgrounds. They've got a lot of experiences too in how they're managing alongside of this new generation, how they're motivating this generation, and sometimes taking orders from this generation. So what is it all like? What does it all mean? And then, of course, we've got a Gen Z herself in Nicole Gruenhaupt. Nicole has quickly become a senior recruiter. And in her senior recruiter role, she is working alongside of companies as well, giving them strategic tips on how to attract this generation. And obviously, being a Gen Z herself, she's got a lot of things to say about this. So join us for the next 30 minutes on a lot of great advice and tips for you in the area of again, how to understand, retain, and attract this generation. So I'm going to dive right in, and we're going to go right to Nicole. Nicole, I want you to really lay the foundation for us from your perspective. And I know you're relatively new in your career, I would say, and you've made such a great impression. So tell me, what would you say a Gen Z is looking for in employers today? You know, if you were to give a tip to hiring managers, what are some things that they should consider to attracting this generation?
Sure. And I do want to highlight too, I'm one person, talking from my experience, but I've also talked with a lot of my colleagues and, other professionals, my siblings, my friends, who have kind of helped me think through, what is really in demand for our generation. And I would say it really breaks down into four main areas. I would say the first is hybrid remote work. Then we have location or quality of life, that balance between work-life balance, career growth, and then the last one is really pay transparency. I think for most of us, we were in school during COVID. And so that really shaped our expectations, desires. I think for a lot of people, we were kind of like, okay, this is absolutely crazy. And we kind of helped refocus where our priorities lie. And so for us, having a remote work style or being able to work from wherever, maybe going to a location first and then finding a job. I know my brother did that. I, for example, live in Los Angeles, but I'm able to work remotely just because it's fun to live in a big city like that. And I know many people are having that as well. And then with COVID, we started, many of us in our career, in a remote setting. And even when we were in school, that was just it became the norm, or even that hybrid work. And so while some of us really like that, some of us also kind of crave that in-person, environment as well. So it's kind of a balance. I would say it's fairly split, and it also really depends on the industry. I would say career growth is really important for me personally, but also with many of my colleagues. I think that being able to understand when interviewing or considering a role, okay, we're not just looking at what is this role right now? Where does that go within the next 5X amount of years? And what does that career path look like? It's very well laid out at Duffy Group, which I appreciate. That's something that drew me in here. But even for others, understanding and having those conversations, I don't think that it would hurt. I think it would really generate a lot of excitement. And I think a big piece of that is the times are kind of changing. People are getting married later. People are buying a home later, starting a family later. And so there's a greater emphasis on, really having that, career focus earlier in your life compared to some of the other generations. And then the final piece is really on pay transparency. That's huge for our generation. Absolutely huge. I think that, a lot of that is due to social media. I think that it's not a taboo topic anymore, at least for our generation. And there's, different accounts that will interview passerbys on the street and say, what's your title? How much do you make? Where do you live? And they'll do this nationally. And I think that that is absolutely pivotal as we're moving forward. I know some states it's, happening from a legal perspective, but I think as far as looking to retain and attract talent, having that transparency is absolutely huge.
No, that's really helpful. And Nicole, you're right. I don't want to put you on the spot as if you're representing all Gen Z, but that's a pretty tall order. However, what you've pointed out is there's variety, right? There's variety even in your generation in terms of what they're looking for. There might be dominant characteristics to consider, but for the most part, it's that variety. And that, you pointed out COVID. That's really interesting, how your generation had to adapt much earlier in terms of that online experience and exposure. So huge, very huge. Now I know Kristen, you've done some research on this topic too. And while you're not of the youngest generation, you're still young in spirit. And I know you've had a lot of experience working alongside of this and researching this topic. How would you add or complement what Nicole had to say?
Well, yeah, and I agree with everything that I heard Nicole talking about. And I think there's a couple of other areas that we're seeing from just our active searches that we're doing, right? So we are talking to Gen Z as candidates today, trying to recruit them for Duffy Group to work for the clients that we have that we partner with. And a couple of other things that I would add to what she said, and I agree with everything she said, is these candidates are really looking for a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI. If companies don't have DEI policy, a DEI training within their organization, Gen Z really isn't interested in working there. I agree with that sentiment, even though I'm not in that generation, and I'm really happy to see that how inclusive Gen Z is with their friends, family, and they want to bring that into the workplace as well. And I think that all dovetails into company values and purpose. I think, Nicole, you even shared with me the other day that before you came to Duffy, you looked at what our mission statement was online, what our company values were, and you wanted to make sure that those resonated with you. And the same thing happens with candidates that we talk to. They're taking a look, and if you're a company that's not publishing that on your website, and then you're also not walking the walk, talking the talk, and really showing that you're participating as a corporately socially responsibility, you're not actively participating in community service, different charitable events. Those are areas that Gen Z is really, really looking to see in their future employers, and they're going to steer themselves a different direction if they don't see you doing that.
So with that being said, Kristen, because you're talking to hiring managers all the time and you're trying to help them find the very best talent, right? How hard is this for them? Have you been seeing that these companies are not adapting to these principles, to these new ways of thinking, getting their mission statement up, engaging with the community, all these key attractions? What are you finding is most difficult for companies to do to steer in that direction?
I think for the most part, the clients that we work with do an excellent job of that. A lot of our clients are nonprofits, so they're, in a space of doing good for others.
Mhm.
But then, the folks that are out of that sector are also making sure that they are communicating to the candidates what they're doing in their communities. I think Glassdoor, to throw that out there,
Mm,
if an employer is not doing these things, it shows up on Glassdoor.
mhm.
Totally.
And because Gen Z is so tech savvy, they're researching these companies ahead of time. They're looking at these things. And if you have a bad reputation, it shows up there. It shows up other places as well. And it's your job as an employer to get that fixed, because it's not just for this generation. It's for, all your employees.
Right. I would say all employees really are looking at that glass door these days, right? And
Yep.
technology is something you can't ignore. So, and reputation is huge. We know that to be true. So, okay, so that's great. I appreciate that with the research and Nicole, your perspective. But so, Colleen, let's just shift gears a bit. You actually lead, like many, these projects with a number of recruiters. You're motivating them. You're working alongside of this young generation. I'd like your take on what you've learned anecdotally, and do you enjoy this generation? What have you learned about yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you, Georgia. I have learned so much from working with Gen Z. This has been one of the most, I think, eye-opening and transformative experiences of my career. And part of the reason is, my career, I've been doing executive recruitment for many years, 25 years plus. And during that time, my career has primarily been focused at the CEO level. And so as a result, I have throughout those years really been working primarily with the older generations, the baby boomers and Gen X, in terms of my clients, in terms of my candidates, and in terms of my coworkers. And then there was this big shift that took place. And I now find that I am working alongside with a lot of Gen Z folks. I work very closely with Nicole, and I've learned so much from Nicole and the other Gen Z recruiters that we have here. And let's face it, many of them still are not my candidates, because if Gen Z is 12 to 27 and my specialty is CEO searches, they're not the people necessarily that I'm recruiting, but they are the people that I'm working alongside. And what I have learned from them and what I've enjoyed is a number of things. I'll, at a high level, just share a few. One being their energy level. Some of us of the older generations, we might be getting a little tired, sometimes a little worn out, and to be surrounded by people who are thirsty for knowledge and ready to do good work and grow in their careers is energizing. And let's face it, they are tech savvy. So there's no doubt that I have learned from them in that regard. I also enjoy how they can be outspoken, speak their mind, ask the right questions. So all of that has led to just really better communication amongst ourselves. And therefore, anytime you have improved communication, you have better outcomes and results. So that's been fantastic. And, they're a lot of fun. And so I've just enjoyed that aspect. My kids are Gen Z as well. I have 15 and 17-year-old sons, and they're closer in age to my recruiters than the recruiters are to me. And I've learned so much from all of them that this has been one of the most enjoyable aspects of my career.
I tell you, I'm with you. A matter of fact, I'm learning how to communicate with my own kids just by by nature of the beast, by working alongside of them, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, wow, I could talk to my kids a little differently now. But no, it's great. It's really exciting. So that's great. Thanks, Colleen, for that, because I know you've been very successful in your projects and getting people to move forward, and those results are huge. And so I know you've got the techniques to do it well. And in terms of, Sharon, I when I turn to you, I always smile because Sharon, you just are such a bright light. And I know when people are working with you, they're always excited to work with you. Tell me a little bit about your experience with this generation, because like Colleen, you're working alongside of this generation and other generations. How do you keep your searches moving forward and motivate this team?
Yes, exactly. I share a lot of the same comments that Colleen made in working with more senior level for clients and our candidates. However, that didn't always be the case. And one word in listening to Nicole that comes to mind is disrupt. So I think there's a lot of disruptors that are very much welcomed that we didn't think we needed, but I see that we really do. And so I'm just going to go with that. So this is a welcome disruptor and an eye awakening in a lot of ways. So I'm not as much of the workaholic, I'm driven, but I'm learning that there are times, and it's fine to have your personal time off and things like that as well. I'd say there are a lot of growth areas for me. We talked about the pay transparency. I didn't know that I understood that or how that would go, but I'm comfortable with that. I understand. And, definitely, as I mentioned, the work-life balance, the hybrid and remote. Yeah, I wasn't sure initially, to be honest, about that. And knowing that the Gen Z that's working now, they were during COVID, and then everything changed to remote. And I think that there were some pluses and minuses to that. I liked personally when I was in my 20s working in an office and having mentors and being part of that energy. But we have mentors with each other here, and it's working very well. And so I think that there's actually, for me, just some blurred lines of working with a Gen Z very closely, and also on my personal life too. Several months ago during Christmas, I performed a small role, an adult role in the Nutcracker. And all of the dancers were in the 12 to 27 range. So I had every aspect, and actually some were younger than that. And I was welcomed with open arms, and I was very nervous, and they made me feel so comfortable. We were not competing. We weren't all females trying to look the best and compete. And that was just so nice. That was another reminder of things that we don't need to be that way. Things are much more kinder, gentler. If that's a word. We have all those traits in a professional environment too. I'm a very curious person and have always been. And so I see that from this generation. I honestly see a lot of similarities between our generation and the Gen Z, and also music. So everyone here knows I'm a Swiftie. And so I know you grew up on Taylor Swift. And so so if I sing or say some phrases, like, you guys get that. You get me, I get you. And I love it. I love fashion. The 90s, it's all nostalgia for me.
Yeah.
I can go on and on. So I'm just really excited.
No, I know. And that's why we love you. We love you. And, it's funny that you said that in terms of they're so receptive to variety of thought. And it's very exciting from that perspective. And you talked about the competition piece. That was very interesting as well. You don't sense competition among this group. I don't know if that's fact or fiction, Nicole, what your take is on that. But I think this work-life balance piece is really interesting because Sharon, I can't speak for everyone on this panel, but I know you relatively well. And I know that you have done a lot of things outside of work to balance your life. So I've always been very intrigued by that. And prior to this conversation ever taking place, I think the panel talked about how driven we were as women work in the workplace. Work, 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 work. That was our focus. Don't take your eye off the ball. Have kids, but you got to put them in the compartments, right? And balance was really hard to come by. Right. So, and I think that's what's intriguing about this generation. And Nicole, can you speak to that? When you think about, because you talked about job growth and aspiring to new heights, certainly you have the skills, and this generation has the skills to do just that. How do you look at job growth, especially in light of this virtual world? How do you view yourself taking notice of those great skills and not getting ignored because you're not in the office every day talking to your boss and things that we used to do just to get noticed? Tell me what your take is on that.
Yeah, I think a couple of things there. So when we're looking at work-life balance, this is really my viewpoint. And I think probably a lot of my peers, a lot of our parents are Gen X, are your generation. And so we saw that drive, like work was your identity. It might still be your identity. And for us, work is a part of our life, but I wouldn't say that it's our biggest identifying factor. And so I think that that's a really big shift for our generation. And I think that we put that priority on taking the vacation, living where you want to live, whatever that might look like, because it's creating that more well-rounded view. And also taking vacation, it gives you time to relax, reset, and you come back stronger. And I think that that's just, I don't know, that's just been my thought process always. And then I think as far as okay, how do you show up in a virtual workplace? You're not in the office, people don't always see you, hitting the pavement, grinding. I think it really depends on your results. I mean, I'm a very results-driven person. If I'm getting my stuff done, I'm meeting my goals, I'm doing whatever is expected of me, then I'm doing my job. And I don't have to be that person who's just grinding. I'm very driven. I will grind when I need to. And then it shows up in my results. And I think that that's a really big hesitation for people. Well, if they're working at home, are they actually working? Well, are they getting their stuff done? You kind of have to flip that script because we're used to that environment where they sat at their desk from 9 to 5, they're doing their job. Or are they getting their stuff done? So it's just a totally different mind shift. I think for managers, it's really different.
I have to agree. And I would say, we talked, I don't know if we've even touched on this, but setting expectations. Hiring managers need to set expectations, right? That I think is so key in this environment. And I do see hiring managers, companies struggling with that, thinking if someone's at home, how do I keep tabs? Well, you keep tabs by having a very solid expectations, KPIs, whatever it is. If people are not performing, it shows up, right? It shows up. It's just common sense. And I think that that's just a new way of looking at things. And so that's great. That's great advice. So I see some chat going on in this table talk, which is really exciting. Everyone offering different perspective on their work with this new generation and engaging with them. But we do have a question here that I'd like to get to, and please chime in, audience, and chime in, panel. The question is, how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic and the shift to remote hybrid work has impacted Gen Z's workplace preferences and expectations? I think we briefly touched on this, but who would like to take a stab at that question? I think
I'd like to almost to set the stage a little bit in the contrast, because, and I'd love to hear a bit from Nicole on this, and because what I found is, as the Gen Xers who were really lacking the work-life balance, and I think those of us too who work remotely, part of the issue on those who didn't understand how to create good work-life balance. They were working from home and always working. And so I think back to when the pandemic hit, and I don't recall ever stopping or ever having a minute off, much less a day off. And so I think back to experiences, and while I was watching the rest of the world sort of step out of the workforce and take quite a long break, I was working more than ever. And then I think we really saw a shift, because as Nicole's spoken about, the COVID pandemic was really the impetus to this this entire shift that's taken place. And so I personally have made a lot of changes. I'll say, like, last summer I didn't take a vacation. This summer I'm taking like 2 to 3 different little trips. So I'm making changes because, again, I'm learning from these folks.
I'm with you 100%. Other comments on this COVID-19 and the impact it had on us?
I would say just something about technology, which I meant to mention earlier as well. Gen Z is wanting to leverage every sort of technology possible, which makes sense, right? So sometimes it's harder for the folks that are older than them to adapt to the new technologies, whether it be Zoom. I mean, just think of all of the silly Zoom calls you had early in the pandemic, and nobody could get their camera to work, their audio to work. Now we have, light rings, and it's, and the people who really embraced all of that were Gen Z, right? And thank God, because they worked with us and they helped the older folks get on board and get a little more technologically savvy.
And look better on screen, right?
Yes. Although my lighting still is not on point. I know. But
okay.
I'm getting there.
You don't need special lighting. You're beautiful as is. So, well, I think this is great. And any other comment about the COVID-19 before I just zero in on a couple more questions? Okay. So I think I'm going to just kind of point to each and every one of you to take one piece of the puzzle and give me the one word that describes what, how you would define retaining, let's say, a Gen Z. So real quickly, Nicole, you've given us a lot of guidance in terms of how to attract a recruit, but what's the one thing, if you said like there's 4 different key things, you've shared that with us, but what's the one thing that comes to mind that if an employer thought about that and integrated into their strategies would work pretty well?
I think open-mindedness. That's not necessarily very specific, but I think being open-minded to having a remote model, being open-minded to putting the job summary, with the pay range on there. I think that word kind of goes into a lot of different areas that really encompasses it. I think that, to Sharon's point, like, we're coming in, kind of storming into the workplace and kind of flipping a lot of things on its head. And so just being open-minded to considering something new.
Perfect. Open-minded. Colleen, what's the one word that comes to mind when you think of retaining this generation in your company?
I'm going to go with a value alignment. I think that that's really important to have. And I think, ultimately, when it comes to this type of conversation, we've got to do, even though we are stereotyping by talking about the different generations, I think it's really important to make sure that we are looking at people as, individuals and resist that urge to stereotype, but instead let's look at that value alignment and have that be more of the focus.
I love it. And now, Sharon, what's one word to better understand the incoming generations? What would you use?
Oh gosh, because there's really 2. If I can get, they're driven. So keep them challenged. Okay. And have that be part of your culture. So if you're saying your culture is one thing, it better be, because leaving, they will do, and it's not going to be looked down upon like it used to be of someone staying not very long and leaving.
Wow.
So true.
Yep.
Very powerful. Okay. So there you heard it here. So keep an open mind, Value alignment is very key, very important. And this is a driven generation, so keep them challenged. These are just things to better understand, attract, and retain this great generation up and coming. So I think with that said, we've rounded out this Recruiter Table Talk for the month. I want to thank my panel. I want to thank Nicole and the audience for staying with us. I think it's a great and relevant topic that we'll hear more from as we go. Again, great questions from the audience. And I'll just close in saying that I'm excited for the future, and companies, I think, are showing a lot of flexibility. And I think there's a great deal of promise with this group and with future generations up and coming. So thanks again, and check us out. If you haven't heard of Duffy Group, check us out on our social media platforms, and come with us again for this ride next month when we do Recruiter Table Talk, and it is surely to be a great topic coming up. So thanks again, and talk soon.